You need to be curious. You never need to be set in your ways. You need to make sure that you have a growth mindset, that you're looking at things differently, that you're not just copying and pasting something that you've done that's worked for you the last couple of times, because that might not be what always works. And in order for this industry to be successful, we need to keep evolving and thinking of new things to do and not keep doing the same things that we have been doing.
Welcome back, everybody. This is the Chief Community Officer Series hosted by Clocktower Advisors. I'm Todd Nilson, founder of Clocktower Advisors. And in this series, I am looking at the entire role of head of community or chief community officer. What makes it up? What are the paths that people take in their career to get to this role? And what does the future of this role happen to look like? And with me today, I have two wonderful people who are going to be engaging in this conversation. My guest is Katie Bapple with Building Brave of late, who's the Chief Community Officer, Head of Community, and my colleague, Jae Washington from Birdie in the Hand is her organization, her consulting organization, and she is a colleague of mine in the Community Consultants Collective on our board. So welcome to you both. Jae, do you want to just say a few words of introduction, and then we'll get into Katie's bio here.
I am Jae Washington. I am the head of community over at Headspace, as well as the principal over at Birdie in the Hand LLC. It's a management consulting firm whose mission is to create a more mindful culture with leadership development and training, but also creating a new state of being within organizations. And being is an acronym. You can learn more about that acronym if we talk. I'll pass it over to Katie for now.
Thanks, Jae. I'm Katie Bapple. Most recently, I served as Chief Community Officer at an organization called Building Brave, with a purpose of empowering women in the workplace, feelings of otherness, DEI, belonging, things like that for specific women's employee resource groups. But my experience is actually another 15 years before that, working more in the B2B and B2C space on community platforms as a consultant as well. So we all have something very innate in common, which I'm excited to talk about.
Well, I'm so excited to have both of you on the call here. Actually, both leaders in the community space and in the work that you both do. And I'm hoping that today we can enter into some conversation that is both realistic and clear-eyed about what it means to be in these leadership and leader-facing roles in the community space. Community professionals for a long time, they tend to toil as individuals within organizations. But as those organizations grow larger and they need bigger community teams, we've seen an evolution into more leadership-oriented roles in the community profession, whether it's a director of community, a VP of community, a head of community, or a chief community officer. But as you start to climb into the clouds, you see fewer examples of these roles as you go, which is one of the reasons I wanted to do this series. Katie, could you maybe start us out by talking a little bit about your journey into leadership roles in the community world?
Absolutely. Like I said, I started community pretty early. It was back 2008, 2009. So this isn't something that simply happened overnight, though there are many very impressive people that climb very quickly in community. And really, I've just always had an innate, really passionate drive towards connecting people and driving experiences. And that comes from being part of an amazing community myself, which is a whole nother story. So I won't focus on it too much because it's very much in the real world rather than the online world, which will be most applicable for people in this conversation. But I started with community as a product company that had been around for 20 years, which was very rare in that day and age for there to be a community in 2009 that was getting ready to celebrate its 20th birthday. So I got to really learn from the ground up. And I think it's that early entrance that helped a little bit to sort of give me the space and time to really learn different community patterns and learn how to read data in big ways, and then take that and then form a consultancy. Really, I formed a professional service division for a community platform company to actually, if you count an acquisition there. And through that, I was able to work with over 45 different companies to build community. One that's probably people will be most familiar with is IBM. I believe the team that I led still is the outsourced manager of the community.ibm.com. So you can see there's a lot of different experiences when you work with associations, and then you work with B2B SaaS companies, and you work with B2C companies, and you really get a good, well-rounded opinion that community is never going to be exactly the same. And I think that is one of the keys, is that you never really settle in and say, okay, this is exactly the way we do things. I think we tout a lot of best practices in our industry, and I think that's great. And I think that's applicable sometimes. But I think unless you're looking at something with a new, fresh perspective, and you're open to not having the answers every time you go into something, then that's really how you're successful and how you keep growing and how people start trusting you at a higher level, because you really show the passion of being interested in that exact use case and how you make companies successful. Through that, I believe that that's how I would go to orgs, and people reach out, and I talk to recruiters, and I'd interview on more advanced levels. And that was kind of always my approach. I had this kind of a business model that I'd show them and be like, okay, this is you. Like, I'm not going to fill it in, but let's say we did. And I'd really get up there and whiteboard. This was pre that thing that happened in 2020 when everything went online. And I'd whiteboard in the interview with them and show them, this is what we need to be focusing on. This is what your org needs to be doing. And it was never about what they expected. It's what I really believed and thought that organization needed that I think caught attention. So that's not a black and white, very linear, this role answer. But I think it's the more important answer, is that you don't do what's expected. You do what people need to hear, what they need to know in order to find their success in their own way. And I was lucky that people recognized that and gave me the opportunity to have a platform. I always have had to fight for my runway to some regard, because community is kind of an underdog. And I think we know that. It's not innate where you get a massive budget sometimes, like marketing, but it's that persistence and the ability to speak with other executives and be confident that you can create value.
It's hard. We're not, directly responsible for lead generation. The thing that most people come to us for, if they're asking for a community use case, is we want engagement, which is this nebulous concept. And until you can really understand what an organization perceives as the goals for those kinds of engagement, what does engagement actually look like for you in this organization, in this situation? I really like your approach that it's got to be situational. It's got to be understanding, where those individuals come from.
I would love to hear from you, Katie, because of your depth and breadth of experience and expertise. What have you found to be the evolution of community? You said you've been in this game for 20 years, and I'm sure you've seen a lot and heard a lot. You've spoken to believers and non-believers. And what have you learned? What have you seen as in regards to the evolution of community in the B2B space specifically?
No one says this answer, but I don't feel like we've evolved much in 15 years. I just feel like it's important to be super candid about that. Yeah, I still run into people, especially through consulting, where they're just discovering it yesterday. Or this is something where it's still not a priority. I think we're seeing that a lot the last 2 years through people, reducing staff, is that there's still not enough of an understanding to know what it's like to lead with community in order to create better products. And I'm saying that specifically in regard to the B2B like SaaS space, which I think you were kind of referring to there, Jay. I think that obviously we're seeing more of an uptake in it at the enterprise level. 15 years ago, we didn't see all of these best in class communities that we have as really great case studies today. And so I think that there's a lot to learn. We have more research, we have more awareness. There's a heck of a lot more people in the community management industry than there have ever been. Most of those, I think, do succeed in the B2B space. But I think we have an awareness. We've kind of reached a threshold, crossed the chasm, so to speak, on awareness within relevant industries and people who have crossed over and who are drinking the proverbial Kool-Aid. But I think at a company level, when you look at the organizations that could benefit from it, or maybe even the ones that don't, that try it, there's still a huge misunderstanding. And I'd love to see that evolution pick up more as there are more community professionals to kind of spread this word. More people are doing consulting community than ever before. And I feel like that has to amount to something on driving an evolution that we haven't seen. Because I don't think we've crossed the chasm when it comes to the actual business side of community. And as I say that, I also think that there are a lot of community professionals that also need to get out of the old way of building community. And this is a little bit delicate, so I'm not going to really define the old way, but really look at it as a business strategy. You are not part of a business. Like, you're not a microcosm of a business. You are a big part of the business, and you could drive more than what you think you can. There's a way to ingrain ourselves better. I'll pause at that.
Oh,
No, that's wonderful. That integrative view of business, I think, is maybe one of the characteristics of, moving into more of a leadership role in organizations. One of the things that I fear is that community leadership roles have been held back because C-suites, for better or for worse, have perceived community in front of any job title as being kind of a tactical, siloed role in the organization. And part of our job is, as you were pointing out, it's educative and evolutionary, is that we need to help them see just how integrated community is as an approach to managing to the success of a given organization.
Here's what I think is the biggest key to that. This is something we don't talk about a lot either, I don't think. One of the biggest skills that I think you need to have as community builder, especially somebody that wants to see themselves in these higher level roles, that wants to make community an integrated part of the business, is internal evangelism. But we kind of put ourselves in silos sometimes, and we're told, like, this is where you exist and this is your job. But really, those opportunities that put you at the higher level, that make you more of an integrated part of the business, don't exist unless you can really push the boundaries on that. And the way you do that is by saying, okay, well, I don't work for just one part of the company. I work across all parts of the company. I'm part of my organization. I'm a part of every organization, because in that way, then I can go to product and understand what shortcomings they're experiencing, on having people really understand what the use case is and what the journey looks like, and how people feel in the moments when they interact with this specific functionality and how it's working or not, or on the support side and how you can be more effective on the customer success side, customer experience side. There's just so much crossover. And if we take the time, really, I think upfront, to say, hey, I'm not here to, step on your toes. I really want to understand what you're doing today, what successes you're experiencing, what challenges are really kind of keeping up tonight. And hey, can I lend a hand? And then as you build those relationships, that's how you kind of eke your way in and work together on projects. And it's just kind of this natural thing that happens over time, where you're integrated in the business. You made it happen. And then making sure that community and keeping the members of your team on staff, making sure there's a career path, just kind of naturally happens over time. But you have to be willing to fight for it. You have to be patient. This doesn't happen overnight. It's kind of not days or months. It's kind of a year's sort of investment.
Say that. And so what I hear, Katie, is so inside as outside. You can't build an externally facing community if you have not done the work of building it internally. And I don't think people often equate cross-functional partnership as building community, but that's very much what it is.
It's that buy-in piece that we always talk about, but we never really go into a lot of detail on, like, this is what buy-in truly looks like. It's not enough to have a CEO agree, like, oh yeah, I'll sign off on that role. That sounds like something that we need, because it sounds bad to say that we don't need to know how our customers feel and to have somebody be that close to them. But it's another thing to kind of take it to the next level and not only get just some of leadership to believe, but get to the company to actually believe in you, get the support of all these different departments to see the value in what you bring to the table.
I'm very curious, as a community leader and one who has navigated executive spaces, how do you face challenge? How do you face non-believers? How do you, what is your approach to those individuals who don't understand or believe in the value of community?
it's about building understanding. I love challenge because it means that there's two people that are coming to the table that are equally passionate. And you might not, no one's probably going to get to like, where exactly they want the other person to be. But if you're respectful and you're smart about it, what you come to in the middle could be so much better than what you originally thought you were going to come out with. So I like to go and approach challenges by being transparent on, I respect your opinion. I know where you're coming from. What doesn't feel right about this to you? Like, let's walk through this. What would this look like to you? And then kind of being like, okay, I love that. I respect that. Here's something that I am hearing. I think it's always about bringing data, always bringing about insights. Again, if you're being smart as a community builder, you're not speaking on your behalf. It's not what I want. It's what these hundreds, thousands of people have said. And hey, like, I get where you're coming from. Can I just show you something? Like, this is something that we're seeing, and here's some data on it. Here's some qualitative information. Like, does that change how you might approach this? Like, what are your thoughts? It's not about necessarily making somebody feel challenged. This is why I think behavioral economics is really important for community professionals to learn too, because then you learn how to kind of get those positive relationships in a way that fits within human nature. But challenge is a good thing. It means people care and that you can ultimately make them your biggest ally.
I appreciate that.
And now you're sending me for Google to learn more about behavioral economics. That's wonderful. I appreciate that. So I'm curious, listening to you about, the various organizations that you've worked with and helped over the years. Have you found with that leadership role in community, were you usually the first person to hold that position? In other words, was it something that you ended up because of the evolution of that organization that they said, we need somebody that's got oversight over this role? I'm wondering the extent to which that director of community or community lead role is something that, we're not seeing people like getting, someone moved out of that role and then somebody else moved in. Is it something that's usually you're the first person filling that position?
In most cases, I have been the person to originate the department, the role, in order to see that come to realization. It could be that there was a very small team in place and they were kind of still figuring out what they were and what they wanted to be. And they might have had like a manager in place because they wanted to make sure that they were being smart on the structure on getting this new team started, but it really didn't have the direction it needed yet in order to grow and sort of have that bigger seat at the table.
And my follow-up to you is, was there ever an organization you got into that role and decided, wow, they're just not ready to do this yet?
Thankfully, I've picked, thankfully, I'm thinking now as I talk, I'm like, wait a second, am I being dishonest here? Because I think it's really important to be honest. I think that I've never joined an organization where I felt like there hasn't been a path forward on a community-led approach. I think it's not uncommon to join organizations where the way that you do business at that high of a level in community, there are things that won't work. Like, for example, I joined an organization where I was hesitant taking the role, and I asked questions of the CEO and the board and said, hey, would you be willing to change this? Can we talk about this? And that's really what made it interesting to me. And then in order for it to actually be feasible, once I got in and saw the data in the matter of a couple of days, like, ooh, we need to change the product, we need to change the revenue model, and community is not going to be viable here unless these things happen. So you definitely run into that when you've had enough experience running numbers and integrating yourself in the business to understand the signs. But there was still a path forward. So I think obviously if you run into an org and you don't see that path forward, it's your responsibility as somebody that understands to kind of, give them the free consultation that I can't move forward because, listen, you have these indicators. And I think that, I'd be happy to help you in this capacity, but maybe not on a permanent basis.
I appreciate that so much. It makes me think about the journey, and whether it's a professional journey or a personal journey, it's neither linear nor perfect, but we all hope purposeful. So I'm curious, within your journey, can you talk a little bit about, your own specific journey, like your insecurities? Has there ever been imposter syndrome? Have you ever felt as a woman it was a challenge? I think for me in this conversation, I listened to someone like you as a leader and look to find some commonality. And so I'm just curious if you've had challenges or doubts, and what that has looked like, and how have you overcome those doubts?
I love this question because everybody who I worked with in my last community, where they were women in leadership roles who face X, Y, and Z challenges. And we don't talk about it. And so I'm going to be very candid in talking about it because I think people need to realize that nobody knows what the heck they're doing. Even this conversation, I walked and I'm like, man, am I still good enough to have this conversation? Like, am I out of practice? What do I need to read up on? How many videos do I need to watch? And so that uncertainty, I think, is there for everybody. And I think everybody expects, especially women leaders, to carry that a lot, even the people who don't show it. When I got my chief community officer role, it was like this dream that I never had because we don't see a lot of people with the title. There was starting to be a lot more competition in the space. It wasn't something I was looking for. And when they gave it to me, it was like this, like I cried because, because I was like, how am I good enough for this? Like, how did they pick me? You know, like that feeling that you get where you need to check yourself. But I still think I had to wake up every morning and remind myself that I was good enough because that imposter syndrome was so strong and so natural for who you are when you step into these roles. I think you're always going to question every decision that you make and how it impacts other people, especially when you truly care about your team and your community, and that every decision you make can't make everybody happy at that level. It's a constant guessing game. And I don't think anybody that's sitting in any C-level role or VP level role or anything at a leadership level isn't questioning the decisions that they make, even if you can't tell on their face that they, that's something that lies within them. So like I said, I want to be 100% candid. So I want to make sure that I'm not underselling this, that absolutely I have imposter syndrome. Absolutely. Do I not know what I'm doing sometimes? But I can say that I have good intuition and I have a gut feeling. And when I remind myself that every decision I've ever made to get to where I'm at has led to either an outcome where I've learned something that's made me better or has led to something that has helped other people and helped them be better, then you can't really regret the things that are your insecurities in this business or in leadership.
I think there's so much wisdom in that you just shared, especially for maybe newer community professionals who are thinking about a career path and career growth and way forward. That it's easy to think that like when you get to those higher levels of decision making and interaction with leadership teams, that you have to be sure of everything you're doing and that you can't show any doubt whatsoever. And it's the opposite of that. That I think that the more responsibility that you have, the more you end up questioning yourself through that process. So I thank you for sharing that reality of how it is. It's definitely something that I've bumped into every time I've worked in an organization with leaders like that. So I'm wondering if we can switch gears in the time we have left to talk a little bit about the prognosis for these kinds of roles. We've come through this really interesting, I'll call it interesting, painful for many, time of the pandemic, where there was frankly a renaissance of hiring and around community builders. The entire blockchain world and crypto kind of blew up at that time, creating a lot more community roles, community jobs. We got to the other side of the pandemic, and then we saw this precipitous drop off in people in the community space, just like the rest of the tech sector, really. But I think we felt it because we're all really connected to each other, and it seemed like every LinkedIn hit, was another hit to our morale around the space. And now we're in this interesting space, and it was interesting. You were saying like we haven't really kind of gotten out of the across the canyon yet, I think was the word you used. I was thinking about the Gartner S curve for technology. Like we sort of had that peak of inflated expectations, and now we're sort of in that trough of just disillusionment right now. But neither one of those extremes are real. That how do we get to that point where this is a more healthy and accepted role in organizations, where it's seen as integrative, and or will we ever get there? I guess I'm asking you to look in your crystal ball, Katie, and tell me what your thoughts are.
I think in some regards, yes, it is. In regards, no. There are two sides of this. I think there are a lot of organizations trying community that aren't meant for it or aren't doing it the way that best suits them. And I think that you'll still see a lot of disillusionment from people picking up on this thing where they're supposed to have a community, or they see competitors like them doing it and finding success with it. And when it doesn't work for them because of approach or restrictions on budget that would be necessary to find that success, or when they get caught in, we have our Twitter, and I refuse to call it X, we have Twitter, we have Facebook, we have, all these other things. There's people on Reddit talking, where, they also define it incorrectly. I mean, I think that's one of our biggest challenges. We're shaking up the definition of community anyways, after all these years. So I think that there's might be a disillusionment on how community is working for people and what they're defining as community, whether they already think they're doing it, but there might be a more productive path for them to move forward. On the other hand, I do think that there are these companies, like especially crypto companies. I was talking to a crypto CEO the other week, and it's just so interesting how natural community is for people that are trading crypto. They have their own language almost. They have their own terms. It's just so naturally a community that you give them a space, and of course they're going to talk to each other. It's amazing when you go in different spaces and you see these early proof of concept communities for crypto. I think that, as we see more crypto companies becoming bigger names, which I think is going to happen, I think that built out probably a better use case, hopefully, for community, and drive the concept of building communities to be a little bit more interesting, a little bit more intriguing, draw a little bit more eyes from the decision makers in the world. And I do think that these B2B, especially SaaS companies, I keep going back to that because that's where our best in case examples are. As you see them needing to adapt to people and the way the world changes and how people want to interact, as long as they're doing it smartly, where they're taking into consideration not only community building, but customer experience, support, product, they're having that integrative approach. I think there's some amazing stories to tell there, as long as people are actually, getting out there and sharing them. So I think it's still, I remember reading articles, and I'm pausing because I remember this is the year. This is the year. I don't think this is year. I don't think next year is probably the year either. But I think within the next couple of years, we'll kind of have our stuff together to figure out where community is successful, what industries are really investing it, and what it looks like to be a success in this day and age, or at least the right approach to figure out how to get there.
I think that's wonderfully put. Do you think there's a space in community world for AI and live community engagement?
Yes and no. People just get very excited about AI, and I am too. I use ChatGPT all the time. I think it's so fun to learn the different things I can use that with.
Too.
The image generators, the video generators. I think there's a place in the community manager's toolkit for it. I think that when you get to the platform side of the community and you get too heavy on AI, then you cross into dangerous ground, because you take away the authenticity of human connection. And there needs to be a very, very careful approach moving forward on how people integrate AI into the community experience, in my opinion.
So we're not going to have AI-driven community moderators or managers in the space.
I can see something on the moderation front, not totally human removed, because people come up with new creative ways to abuse their presence all the time in communities. But I don't think community managers need to worry about losing their jobs to AI.
So we're not going to have an AI digital twin saying "Welcome to community, Jae, fellow human. We are so glad you're here. Allow us to introduce you to Katie, who matches your profile at 75%.
Oh, goodness. Well, I think it's really interesting. There's a saying, I'm not new to this, I'm true to this. And I'm not sure AI has made it to the level where it's true to this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that's the good first impression, but I mean, I've done AI chatbots before, so I can't say I'm totally against it, but there has to be a way to, human connection needs to be the foremost, the first thing that people feel like they can get out of an experience. And then you can throw AI into different pieces, right?
I agree.
Right approach, right time.
Katie, do you feel that these leadership level roles in community are something that most organizations are going to need as a full-time kind of position, or do you see a role for fractional professionals, or is it just straight consulting, kind of work where you only need somebody on a project basis? Like, we need somebody to set our strategy, and then we'll have a community manager to just go forward from here. Like, I'm sure that the answer is more complicated than it's just one or the other. But what do you kind of see as some ideal situations going forward, at least maybe in the next year or two, before, as you said, it's a more integrated approach, that more organizations will get it?
I believe that there's going to be a much stronger use case in the next couple of years for that fractional role to be kind of what introduces the chief community officer position into organizations, to make it more appetizing and to kind of, test the waters before people go all in on this thing that they might not entirely understand or know about, or they might have an idea of that might not be entirely accurate to what somebody can bring to the table. And so I see a really great and interesting way to start injecting this idea of a community-led leadership position into organizations by having this fractional opportunity. I think that the chief community officer role could be something on a permanent basis that we see more of in a couple of years from now, but I'm saying that questioningly in my tone, because I think it depends on these companies that are leading from the beginning with community being a strong belief of theirs and being community led. I think that when you have two different use cases, an organization that is strongly community led and say they are, or community is their product, then that's where you look at the prioritization of chief community officer maybe isn't a luxury in our case. Maybe it's a substitution for something like a chief customer officer. I felt like I was very much a substitute for a chief customer officer in my last role. That's when it starts to make sense and kind of bring that high level positioning together. But I think those use cases are rare. And that's why I think the fractional model might be a little bit bigger of a winner for the next 2-3 years.
I'm curious. We often have conversations in spaces like the CCC, the Community Consultant Collective, around titles and how the title of community has often been all-encompassing, but there's a distinction between a community manager or a community strategist or a community operations person. Do you find at the higher levels there also needs to be some clarity around the role of a VP of community versus a chief community officer? What are the distinctions?
I think the distinction that needs to happen with organizations is realizing who is in the day-to-day versus who is responsible for strategy, and ensuring that internal evangelism is happening and that the threads are all getting weaved together so that you're not acting in a silo. I think that we've defined the lower level roles very well on individual contributors and people managers, and getting into the operations of things, the day-to-day, running special programs, the administrative side, if your organization's big enough. I think what I'm seeing a lot, and especially job postings these days, is people trying to hire, not a lot of VPs, but directors, head of community, where they expect them to be the catch-all, the person who does the day-to-day, but then also somehow finds room for the strategy side of things to also collaborate cross-functionally. And it's just not, in my mind, feasible. That's not a well-defined role in order to set somebody up for success in the long term when you're giving them, 2 or 3 jobs all in one. So I think that's where we have the biggest work to do, especially at more of that higher level, executive level in community, is be clear that are two different opportunities here, and you can't do both by putting it all in one person.
Say that again, Katie. Say that again. Oh my gosh.
I know, we're all tired of seeing those job postings, but also are severely underpaid, I might add, in most cases.
Very true.
Okay,
Very
you can
true.
drop the mic now.
I know, I wish I had one. I've always wanted to do that.
Well, Katie, this has been a really insightful conversation. I feel like I've learned some things, based on your perspectives and ideas that you've been able to come across in your journey as a leader of community spaces. For someone who's thinking they want to grow into this role in the future, I know you kind of did a few drops here along the way of things like behavioral economics. What kind of things do you think somebody needs to pick up along the way to start growing into these kinds of roles, from beyond sort of the day-to-day management of community and configuring platforms and building events and doing like all the blocking and tackling stuff that we're accustomed to doing in this work? What do they need to be setting their eyes on?
I think that there's a lot of, are you talking more from like a skill set, like how can you build the muscle to do this sort of thing?
Yeah, what are the right muscles to build, right?
What are the right muscles to build? I think the proverbial like weights that you need to lift in order to get there. I'm just going along with your analogy. It's not working, I don't think. I'll end it there. There's some things that you just naturally have to be willing to become characteristically, and then there's a skill side to it. So I'll touch on both. The first is that I think, coming up with a really great way to learn about customer experience and customer success. There's so many different disciplines where I think you fit into so many different orgs and you become a stronger community builder when you truly know your customer. And I didn't realize that I wasn't as good of a community builder as I could have been until I learned customer experience, until I learned how to build personas and understand journeys and different touch points and where I should prioritize as a community builder, who needed the most outreach in order to drive up, engagement. Is it the people that are going to come in tomorrow for the first time, and is our first impression terrible? And if so, how do we focus just on that? Or is it, 3 months in when they've reached this point where they're just implementing the tool that this community supports? And then what's kind of the pain point there? So I'd say the first thing is get some books and learn a little bit more about customer experience. There's a great book that I can't remember the name of, specifically on building customer journeys. It's in the title. If you just go to Amazon and search customer journeys, I'm sure you'll find it. It's like big and has a white background and it's like a weird landscape orientation. But find
You're now my hero. You're now my hero.
Their descriptions of books. Jean Bliss also, she used to be a board member at an organization I worked at. She was brilliant. She has a ton of books out there on customer experience. Again, behavioral economics. I love Charles Duhigg. He has great books. He's coming out with a new one called Super Communicators that I can't wait for. The Power of Habit is an amazing book on understanding how people work and why. Yeah, you love that one too?
Yep, I do. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think on the other side of things, there's so many resources out there on building communities. I mean, Fever Bee, Todd, you have so many videos out there on YouTube and elsewhere that people can learn from, different webinars you've done with different organizations led by community, CMX, more on the B2B side, I feel. There's so many things you can go out there and find. Just read the article, subscribe to different independent community builders, blogs. And then on the innate side, I know we're running out of time, but getting to kind of the characteristics you need to build, you need to be curious. You never need to be set in your ways. You need to make sure that you have a growth mindset, that you're looking at things differently, that you're not just copying and pasting something that you've done that's worked for you the last couple of times, because that might not be what always works. And in order for this industry to be successful, we need to keep evolving and thinking of new things to do and not keep doing the same things that we have been doing. So be adaptable. Don't let your feelings easily get hurt when people disagree with you. Be assertive, not being aggressive. You're being assertive and making sure that people understand that you have a perspective and that you have more runway than you think. I'll end it there.
I love that so much. Yes. Yes.
So, Katie, we'll get a full bibliography from you to be able to include with this video, and we'll include that down in the comments here for anybody that's interested in looking up those books. But thank you so much
Thank you
for
so much.
spending this time with us and sharing your ideas and your wisdom. And we'll look forward to following your journey out on LinkedIn and through our ongoing conversations. For those of you who joined, thanks for stopping by. We invite you to subscribe and like and comment on this piece. What's your community building journey been like? Would love to hear about it. If you're in a leadership role in community, would love to hear about the challenges or the obstacles that you've faced, how you've grown, what you see as some of the key skills that are involved. And in the meantime, we're going to have some more interviews around these leadership and community roles. And I hope you join us for those as well. But until then, thank you for joining us and keep building great communities. We'll see you soon.